Module 11. 3 things that can go wrong and how to fix them. Key lesson: an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Here is the life-changing foundational concept of this course. You can attract a man more powerfully by building momentum and deeper layers of significance into the relationship you share. Bringing that new paradigm to life in your relationship is bound to create a bit of shockwave if you do it all at once. So let's talk about 3 problems you might face on your journey towards success. Number 1, he misunderstands your sudden change. Number 2, your optimism polarizes him toward pessimism. Number 3, you get scared and sabotage your own success. Sudden change. First, there's a possibility he will misunderstand the sudden change he perceives in your way of being with him. As you may already know, people tend to resist change, and that's because change triggers fear of the unknown. As a result, the people who love us most, parents, best friend, siblings, romantic partner, sometimes try to sabotage even positive change when it happens suddenly. It just makes them nervous. Let me give you an example. Lisa grew up in a small farming community in Illinois, about 90 minutes drive west of Chicago. Lisa found that living in the city changed her taste faster than she anticipated. She decided she wanted to drop a few pounds, update her wardrobe, and start acting like a more confident version of herself. During visits back home, some of her friends tried to bring her back down to reality with comments designed to remind her who she really was. You could say her friends were jealous or that they thought she was putting on a fake front, but the reality was this: they just weren't used to the new version of Lisa, so they resisted the change. Many of us back down when faced with this kind of peer pressure. We revert to normal to avoid resistance from friends and family, but if you don't back down, something interesting happens. Your friends get used to the new you. If you change back to your old ways, they ask you what's wrong and feel uncomfortable with that change as well. So here's the moral of the story. People will always resist change. That's true whether it's good change or bad change or somewhere in between. Don't let other people hold you back from going after the life you feel is right for you. How does this apply to a romantic partner or love interest? Well, it's just something to keep in mind. While he will ultimately love the changes and feel powerfully drawn to you because of them, it is possible he might put up a little resistance or question your motives at first. Don't let this dissuade you. Press on. Don't let his natural curiosity or hesitation about change make you think he doesn't want it. He just doesn't have the vision yet. That will soon change. Once he experiences the first wave of benefits, he will be all in. And I should remind you, most men will not balk at these positive changes even from the beginning. I only include this section here because some women back down out of nothing more than insecurity or nervousness when their guy asks why they are acting differently. Polarization. Now let's turn our attention to the second problem I want to inoculate you against. It's the possibility that your optimism could temporarily polarize him toward pessimism. Let me briefly explain what that means and then show you how to overcome it. The Earth has a North Pole and a South Pole. They are at opposite ends of the Earth. That's where the term polarization comes from. It's also where the mental health diagnosis bipolar disorder comes from. Bipolar disorder is a mood disorder in which a person's moods vary from one extreme, manic with excessive energy and euphoria, to the other extreme, depression with loss of energy, low drive, and severe sadness. But in the context of our discussion, we are talking about polarization because of the way 2 people can become polarized, pushed to opposite extremes. When people are polarized, it means they adopt a more extreme position, viewpoint, or mental stance in reaction to the position adopted by those they are interacting with. Here's an example of how it happens. 2 parents, Monica and Jeff, are watching their 3-year-old son playing in a sandbox. Monica and Jeff share the same basic beliefs about parenting styles and disciplinary methods. But when their son Isaac purposefully flings some sand toward them with his little shovel, Monica and Jeff run into a little disagreement. Neither parent thought the behavior was appropriate. They both intended to correct little Isaac, but Jeff's initial reaction ends up polarizing Monica's response to the situation. Jeff leaps up, grabs Isaac by the scruff of the neck, and speaks in a very stern voice that makes Isaac begin to cry. Monica thinks Jeff has overreacted a bit and scolds him for being too dramatic. He was just playing. There's no need to treat him like he tried to poke your eye out. Unfortunately, Monica's comment polarizes Jeff as he seeks to defend his position. A moment earlier, he would have agreed with her, but because of the way polarization works, he replies, "Do you want to be the one to explain to the other parents why we let our kids fling sand in their kids' eyes requiring a trip to the eye doctor? We have to nip this in the bud, which is why it was important for me to scare him a little bit." The truth is, 60 seconds earlier, Jeff would not have been an advocate for scaring his son, but polarization causes him to take a more drastic view to oppose his partner than what he otherwise would have taken. You can probably imagine Monica's response. "You are being absolutely ridiculous, Jeff. As if a grain of sand is going to get lodged in some kid's eye. You probably shouldn't have even punished him for that. It was just exploratory play." While Monica probably would have administered some kind of punishment herself if Jeff wasn't around, her interaction with Jeff has now polarized her to the point that she claims no punishment was even needed. This is how polarization works between two people. It pushes us to take extreme positions. Now let's get back to our current discussion of how polarization could cause a hiccup when you initially attempt to implement the momentum method. Here's what sometimes happens. You suddenly become optimistic about what the two of you can accomplish together by setting extraordinary goals, supporting each other in the pursuit of fun, and really going after life with vigor. Your sudden optimism might cause a somewhat polarized response where he tries to balance your perspective by being a little bit more on the negative side. When this happens, don't panic. Nothing has gone wrong. This is a natural reaction people have when the balance they are used to changes suddenly in one direction. What should you do about it? If he becomes negative, saying you are exaggerating the true possibilities of your freedom together, should you give up? Of course not. Your job is simply to acknowledge the truth behind his words and then press on toward your goal. Acknowledging the truth of his balancing perspective will cause him to become depolarized. The more you agree with someone's opposing perspective, the less polarized they become. For example, imagine if he says, "I love the idea of working together to enjoy our free time more, but I think you're not being realistic. We both have busy careers and we can't just forget about that because we want to have a good time." You should respond with something like this. "Oh, I know you're right about that. That's just the reality of our situation. Still, it would make me immensely happy if we made this our goal, even if it's only partially achievable in real life. What do you say? Will you try it with me even if we don't make any drastic changes?" This kind of response will bypass his need to balance you. He will see he does not need to argue the other side. As a result, he will become open to being emotionally moved by the desires your suggestions are tugging at in his heart and soul. Sabotage. Now let's examine the third potential barrier to change. It's the possibility that you might get scared and sabotage your own success. I know, you would never do that, right? But people do. Let me show you why it happens so you can prevent this from happening to you. As you and your partner start to use ideas from this course, you may suddenly feel ungrounded. Many of the routines and slow, monotonous goals you had been working on in your relationship will suddenly fall away and be replaced by a whirlwind of increasing intimacy. Because of the way the momentum method unleashes energy, you will tap into more energy than you are used to. This can cause you to feel afraid in the same way you might feel afraid when turning around and seeing just how high you have gone while climbing a mountain. It's the same thing that can happen when you suddenly reach a new level of financial success. Some people are hit with feelings of guilt or fear of loss, and that causes them to shut down the very actions that were causing their financial success. When these sorts of feelings arise, your job is to acknowledge them as normal reactions based on outdated warning signals from your past. In the past, spending so much energy during your free time would mean you were setting yourself up for an energy crisis or crash after your energy is depleted. But that's because you were living on a lower energy plane with less ability to tap into momentum. Similarly, climbing to new heights of relationship momentum gets labeled as something fake or something that cannot be trusted. That's because with your old way of doing things, sudden changes of this magnitude would be unexplainable and therefore something to be approached with a measure of skepticism. Your job is to remind yourself that those warning signals are based on outdated mental software. Doing so will instantly relieve your sense of anxiety. It will help you refocus on enjoying your new ability to accelerate relationship momentum. Now that we've covered some of the things that can get in your way, let's turn your attention to getting the ball rolling. There's an easy psychological trick I want to show you. It's a way to get buy-in from your man as you implement the momentum method. The foot in the door technique, how to get things rolling. Starting the momentum method is easy when you understand this one principle of human psychology and motivation. It's called the foot in the door technique. That name comes from the visual metaphor of putting your foot in the door as you try to gain access to the room inside. Once you have your foot in the door, gaining access is much easier than it was when the door was latched shut and locked with a deadbolt. But in this case, we're talking about gaining psychological access, the ability to influence your partner's perspective. First, let me give you an example of the foot in the door technique in action. Then, I'll show you how it applies to getting started with the momentum method. In a famous psychological research study that initially revealed just how powerful this phenomenon is, researchers started with a very simple request. They approached homeowners with a request to place a small decal somewhere in the corner of their front window. The decal indicated support for a Slow Down and Drive Safely campaign for the neighborhood. Of course, the researchers did not tell the homeowners it was a research study as they went door to door. They just asked for a very small favor, placing a tiny decal in the window. A few weeks later, the researchers approached homeowners in that same neighborhood again, but this time the request was for a much larger favor. In fact, it was a request so outrageous and ridiculous that to this day people reading about this research study can hardly believe anyone said yes. The researchers asked homeowners to display a very large sign in their front lawn facing the road. The sign was huge with ugly colors, 2 large wooden posts to hold it up, and the Drive Safely campaign slogan written in bold letters. A full 76% of people who had previously agreed to place the tiny decal in the window agreed to have the large sign installed in the front yard. That's more than 3 out of 4 people. That's in comparison to only 17% of people agreeing to the large sign if they had not been previously approached with the request to place the small decal in the window first. What this means is that gaining someone's agreement to a very small request causes them to be far more likely to agree to a more significant request. Here are 2 more examples of this psychological phenomenon referenced in a Wikipedia article on the topic. Can I go over to Susie's house for an hour? Followed later by another request. Can I stay the night? May I turn in the paper a few hours late? And after an affirmative response, may I turn it in next week? The foot in the door technique has also been proven to work when requesting donations for charity. It works just as well in personal one-on-one situations as it does in group settings where one person is making an appeal to a large audience. In other words, it's a powerful and robust phenomenon of how the human mind works. We are simply more likely to agree if you can get us nodding yes in some small way before hitting us up with the bigger request. So how does this apply to getting the ball rolling with the momentum method? By now you can probably guess. Instead of starting with your most bold ideas or requests, approach your man with a simple question that is practically guaranteed to get an affirmative response. The I owe you signal. What we've established so far is this. For some reason, people feel like they owe it to others to be consistent. So if you can get a person nodding yes to something small, they feel they owe you a yes to something bigger, as long as it reflects the same basic idea as the initial request. For example, David, you seem like the kind of person who wants to live life to the fullest rather than holding back and doing what everyone else does like a drone. Would you say that's true? Most people would agree with this as a self-assessment because it's a flattering way to be perceived compared to the alternative. Once you've got him nodding yes to this, you would make a small request for him to take on a small challenge. Here's the challenge you ask him to take on. All right then, David. Try to come up with an adventurous idea, a date or a shared activity the 2 of us wouldn't typically do. His goal is to try to think of something better than the idea you're going to try to come up with during the same short time frame, say one day or before Friday. The trick here is that your initial request gets him nodding yes. He affirms his commitment to being an adventurous person. Naturally, that's something he wants anyway as a man, but getting him to say yes prevents any resistance that might come up for random reasons. Then you make a slightly larger request. You ask him to take the initiative to plan something adventurous, or at least come up with the idea. Even if he drops the ball on this challenge, you'll still be thinking of an idea. And he will have to agree to your idea if he does not come up with something better. Congratulations! You've completed Part 1 of this Relationship Mastery course. Part 1 was all about theory. Now it's time to enhance your skills at applying the secret obsession signals.